All right, so I'm inviting you guys to go on a thought experiment with me about the 90s. Anybody remember the 90s? It's hammer time. So I'm Tom. I am a developer on the Stamp Protocol project, which is a Permaweb protocol. And what was it like? What was the internet like in the 90s? It was hard to access, slow, limited content, and a lot of security concerns. Basically, there was no security. Anyone could upload anything, but you had to run your own server, and you had to know how to code somewhat. So what was the culture like in the 90s with the internet? So you had some movies, the Net, where this secret organization was trying to control things like hospitals and traffic and rule the world kind of thing. And then Hackers, one of my favorite movies, where they got together a whole bunch of kids to attack the Gibson, and the phrase "hack the planet" came out. Really awful movie. And then the Matrix, right? So the Matrix kind of turned the internet of machines and made humans the batteries to power the world, right? So that was the 90s. And what was search like in the 90s, right? Has anyone ever been to one of these sites? Yeah? Ask Jeeves. Ask Jeeves, the first AI, right? Your butler. It was basically just what people put in as indexes, and they were made just simple websites, and you selected your categories and drilled into what you wanted to find. But otherwise, it was super hard. And then what were applications like? You saw a lot of free magazines with free CDs. Some people had coasters of AOL online, right? Remember that? Remember GeoCities? Did anyone build websites with GeoCities? Right? A very popular one was InSync. And then Amazon.com, this little online bookstore that created a lot of buzz. Why would anyone go online to buy books, right? And a lot of the conversation back then was about, should I put my credit card online, right? Should I trust what I do online? So there was a lot of fear and uncertainty about the internet in the 90s. Very similar to AI today, really, when you think about it. A lot of people were nervous. A lot of people didn't know how to get online. They had to buy these desktop computers and figure out how to use dial-up modems, things like that. But there was a network, and there was a social network in the 90s. And Apple kind of used this slogan back then, because when you exchange content with people, you would rip it and then mix it and then burn it. Did anyone have a DVD burner, right? And burned your own mixtapes or things like that? Well, that's kind of like Spotify playlists now, right? You create your playlist and share it with friends. It was a real social network of a lot of people. And a lot of people enjoy doing that, right? Enjoy taking content and mixing it up and sharing it in different ways. So with the Permaweb and Arweave in general, you get permissionless, trustless, and permanent data. So this thought experiment is to kind of take that and say, what if the internet started as the Permaweb back in the 90s? Maybe we wouldn't have username and passwords. Maybe everybody would have digital wallets, and that would be the norm. Could you imagine that? Maybe there wouldn't be a thing of credit cards online, right? Everyone would use internet money to exchange online. Could be kind of interesting. So those are kind of things that we've learned in crypto that are really good patterns. And it's kind of strange when you start to think about it. When the internet was around at first, everyone had to figure out how to be secure. Everyone had to figure out how to do encryption. And I think we as a community picked a centralized path and created a centralized path because the primitives were very decentralized at first. And now with the Permaweb, we're putting tools together to undo the 2000s and the 2010s. We're introducing the ability of sovereignty, so you can sign your own stuff. And so when you put stuff on the Permaweb, you sign for it. You've put a timestamp when you sign for it, and anyone can see that that came from your address. You can use services like Bundler to upload tons of data. You can use ARIO as gateways to read a ton of data. So you've got high throughput for writes and high throughput and decentralization for reads, all on this incredible network. And then finally, you have stamps and a ton of other things, but where stamps comes in is signature, timestamp, and metadata protocol. It really comes in to allow users to pay attention to your content and show the creator that they have valued this content, to keep it open and accessible for everyone, while creators can monetize that in all sorts of ways. But not only does stamps allow creators to monetize their content, it also allows for discoverability. So it becomes a building block for graphs, for indexes, for databases to discover content instead of Ask Jeeves or instead of even Google. I think with stamps, you can create a whole different way to discover content. So possibly we would be able to unlearn centralization, right? We wouldn't have to. I feel like that's what we're doing today, is we're unlearning all of these centralizations. Username and passwords are not great. They're not great. You're giving trust to someone to manage that. Transferring ownership of uploads. Whenever you upload on a Web 2, you're giving control to that service that you're trusting. And that creates walled gardens. So we have all of these great, powerful networks, but they're all walled off. So if you wanted to see how much likes you got on one network, you have to go to that network. You can't go and just query the internet and say, how many likes did I get? So let's unlearn that, right? Let's own our content. Let's use wallets. Wallets are great. They work well. Now we are improving them, and they will get better, but being able to sign your own stuff is a privilege, not a hassle, right? It's a privilege that you don't want taken away. And distribute, right? So being able to use these tools and technologies to put images, videos, all kinds of content and distribute it very easy is amazing. And the Permaweb really empowers that, because you only have to upload it once, and then many, many people can read it. And then discover. So with stamps, not only do you consume content, but you can pay attention to it. And when you transact and say, I'm stamping this, when I scan that QR code, I'm saying that I'm signing this QR code here, now, in Austin, April 28th, 2023, right? And that's going on to the Permaweb forever, onto the network forever. You can't forget that. So even when you get dementia, you will still have a record of that, right? So that's super cool. And then finally, trade. And this is, I think, going to really be kicking up in the next few months with Permaweb. We are going to see a lot of apps start trading this content, and you can trade it in all kinds of ways. Rareweave is an NFT marketplace, so you can trade your apps there, and there's other marketplaces launching, but you can also trade with sponsorships, and you can put content up and just trade some of it. And if you go to now.gateway.io or now.arweave.dev or now.rio.dev, you can trade content with sponsorships. So fractionalized trading, which is really cool. And there's some new releases coming out with PermaFacts. PermaFacts will allow you to actually place a bet on whether an assertion is true or not. And many people can do that, and you can use that community effect to drive on these assertions to see if they're true. So there's lots of different things that are coming with the Permaweb. And if we had these protocols in place in the 90s, maybe we could have skipped all of this centralization kind of stuff. So the Permaweb today and the future, just want to give some numbers. So this month, we've done 84 million transactions, just this month. And the weave size is 127 terabytes. I think there was an article in Nasari that says in a couple of years it's going to be 300 terabytes. So we're growing. I may be wrong about that number, so but it's growing like crazy. If you go to ViewBlock and look at the graphs, they're up and to the right, which is really cool. So the Permaweb is gateways with RIO, HTTPS and GraphQL, bundlers with fast, secure writes, and SmartWeave with compute. So if you're a developer, yeah, it may be a little bit different than Web 2, but I do think that developing in the Permaweb is worth it because you're really focusing on building permanence and not temporary kind of shacks in the valley of the internet. So join us. Join us on the Permaweb. Check out rweave.org, and it's got a map to go whether you're a builder, an investor, or just want to get educated on how everything works. It's a great place to start. Thank you.
In a future where the Permaweb is recognized as essential to preserve our research and prevent its loss, I would like to understand the role of the temporary web. Could you clarify whether there will still be a place for a web that is temporary or transient? Furthermore, considering the significance of both centralized and decentralized systems in nature and other domains, how do you envision the centralized web, as we currently know it, participating within the Permaweb?
Does centralized web need to exist, and where do I see it? Yeah, I think centralized systems are good, right? They've served society really well. I think it definitely does need to exist. I just think that in a way that users have choice and knowledge about that choice so that they can choose where they want to put trust. Do they want to trust a Web 2 company, or do they want to be able to do something where they have more sovereignty with their transactions? So that's kind of how I see it, is we're enabling a system. But I'm also curious that, when we typically solve problems, we tend to choose the centralized option first because it's the easiest, not the hardest. And I think sometimes we can, in hindsight, look back and say, maybe that wasn't a great idea. Yeah, it's great we had that option, though. It's great, what if we didn't have something like the Permaweb? What if we didn't have something like blockchain networks? We really wouldn't have a lot of options, but centralization, and I don't think that's great. Yeah, and that's one thing I didn't touch on is, it may become important in the not too distant future for you to look at data and say, hey, was that signed by Tom or not? Right? Because you may not be able to tell otherwise.